I would argue that, sometimes the harder days are actually your best days. And if you keep that in mind when you're going through hard stuff, then it works out.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. I am so excited to have you here. My name is Tiffany Alexander, and this is Unveiling Journeys. If you have watched any episodes at this point, you know I'm a huge fan of networking and asking people, hey, who do you need to know? And by the way, I think you need to know people. So that's actually how I met Jeff, our amazing guest today. We were hanging out at a really fun mixer in Tampa that we got to go kayaking on the ocean in Tampa. And it was a whole day of just getting to know like incredible high level people. And that's just how it works in this world. He has an amazing story. We get to unveil his journey, but let's start at the beginning. Jeff, welcome. Thank you for being here. Tell us who you are and what you're doing right now.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, that was a great time. So, yeah, I kind of wish I was kayaking right now. I saw the roseated spoonbills. You remember those? The
Yeah.
big pink birds that look like flamingos, but with the weird spoonbill. I've always wanted to see one of those since I was a little kid. My mom told me about seeing them in the Everglades. So I was really excited about that. So that was like a pivotal moment in the last year. I don't know why I cared that much, but it made me super happy. I left there. I called my mom. I said, "Mom, you got to." I saw these birds, and she was very happy for me. So
I think I remember that pivotal moment. We're like, I'm so excited. You're more excited, I think, than
I was
any.
super excited, and like we're out there just kayaking through the mangroves, and I'm like, oh, that's amazing. But anyway, yeah, when you spend time with people like that, it does really add value to your life. So I appreciate you having me as the point. But so what am I doing now? Well, I'm in multifamily real estate mainly, like small, mid-sized multifamily. So I buy 20 to 50 unit buildings. And we tend, the last couple of years, we haven't bought a lot of them. They haven't made a lot of sense, but we tend to buy 2 or 3 a year. We'll maybe sell one, buy 3. So we add a couple a year to the portfolio. So we've been doing that since 2016, 2017. And I do a small group mastermind that I run, and I like to write. So I do a lot of writing and a lot of travel.
Oh, that's great. That's a lot. Like you have a full plate. You're doing all kinds of amazing stuff. And when you have tenants, that many quantity of tenants, you're helping them out, right? Because you're
Yeah.
providing housing for them, fixing it up. You're not doing stuff like the not good
Yeah,
way.
no, that's when our MO is actually to go buy properties that are really poorly run and turn them around and try to, keep as many of the tenants in place as you can by moving them from one unit to the next as you renovate. You can't always do that. I mean, there's the realities of the economics mean that you do have to raise the rent in those situations. So there's going to be a little displacing, but you're providing quality, affordable housing for as many families as possible. And now, we have 300-ish units between the various properties we have, and we have some commercial stuff that's non-residential too, but between that 300 units, it's 300 families that have affordable quality housing because of that, and I love that. And most
Yeah.
of those properties were places I wouldn't live in before, but I would live in now, and that's kind of
Oh, I
my
love that.
standard for that investing. Like, I want to be able to buy in a place where I would feel comfortable living, and then make it into a property I would be happy to live. And if I would be up, I'm not that picky. So like that works. Like some people are like, oh, I need a huge mansion or whatever. I live in a studio apartment. I'm fine. Like I have 2 studio apartments. I have one in Puerto Rico and I have one in Chattanooga. And I just go back and forth between the two.
Well, we're gonna get cracked into that. I love that so much because we have to figure out how you got there. Now, where are you from and where did this all start?
Sure. Yeah, I'm from Grand Rapids, Michigan originally. I lived there until I was about 30, except for when I was in law school. I was in East Lansing, but that's 80 miles away. Until around 30 years old, I never really left the West Michigan area. I mean, I did some traveling, but I never like lived anywhere else. And so that's where I started. I was a bankruptcy attorney in Michigan, actually. That was my background. So
And that's like, how many years of schooling does that take to get?
well, I mean, it would take less if you were more efficient about it, but I went to school for a really long time. I was an overachiever, so I did 3 years in a 2-year community college, like that kind of stuff. Then I took a year off. Then I did 2 years in undergrad. Actually, after my first 4 years, I got pretty serious about it, and I did 2 years to finish my undergrad, and then 1.5 years to do a master's degree that I didn't need for law school. And then 2.5 years for law school, which is normally a 3-year program, but I actually did it faster than average, graduated a semester early. But it was all told about 10 years of college with 1 year off. So about 11 years of education in there before I actually started working.
Oh my goodness. 11 years later, even high school, now you're like, okay, I've got this
Yeah, now
many
I'm almost
degrees.
30, right? And I'm like,
Right. Almost
I'm
30.
29 years old, 28 years old, something like that.
What do you do then? Like, did you go right out, open your own firm?
Yeah, so my dad had a small general practice. And so I actually went to work for him in the summers when I was in law school. And then he was getting ready. He had started another business and he was moving away. So I ended up taking over his practice, which had advantages, but honestly, it probably was a big disadvantage in the end because it came with a lot of overhead, phone book ads, which sound weird now, but
I haven't heard that in
yeah,
so long.
well, I'm old. It was like
Yeah.
20. This is like 2007, right? And the internet what existed, but I mean, it was new. Like most people were still getting their information from phone book ads, billboards, stuff like that. So we had about 10,000 a month in reoccurring advertising cost, and you sign a phone book contract sometimes for multiple years back then, and we had like the year that after my dad fully left, I signed for the back cover of one phone book and then 2 full page ads in the other phone book. So those were like it was like about 12,000 a month for the phone book ads, and you
No
signed
way.
for the whole year. And then
Yeah.
we had billboards and television commercials. I was like the Better Call Saul of West Michigan,
I love
and
that. My husband loves that show so much.
oh, it's such a great show. But yeah, I was like that, but not quite as shady as Saul is, Like, I mean, I was actually following the rules and whatnot. But yeah, it was a fun time. I mean, it was really fun for a little bit. But it turned out I didn't love like the law as much as I thought I would. I like helping people, but I felt like no one likes their divorce attorney, right? I mean, they just don't. So I got out of divorce because I didn't like people being mad at me all the time. And I didn't like fighting over children. That's really bad. And I had a couple of uncomfortable criminal cases where, like, we got a decent result for the client, but I felt like, man, this person's a terrible person and they should probably be in jail. They shouldn't be like free on the streets. And then one of those people ended up committing another crime and it really bothered me. And so I decided I wasn't going to do criminal stuff anymore. So after a while, I just sort of accidentally got only doing bankruptcy, which was fine because it was 2008, right? Like 2009.
Oh my
Like
God. Like,
all of a sudden we had all kinds of work, and it was actually the first 8 months of 2008 I probably made more money than any year up until the last or until like post COVID. Right, like, I mean, we were just like, money was coming in like crazy, and because everyone was like just drowning in debt, and we were, I don't know, 4 miles from a GM plant, and GM had just filed bankruptcy and laid off like all these people with 2 car payments and a house payment. And so all these people would, like, I was the closest law office to them, and so once you had one, then they would tell their friends, and pretty soon you had more cases than you can handle. I think we filed 400 bankruptcies in 8 months.
whoa, whoa.
Yeah, yeah, and those were $100 in legal fees at the time, and our cost was maybe like $400. So I mean, there was money coming in, and it was paying the bills. And I hired another bankruptcy attorney to work for me at that time, and it was a guy I went to law school with, and yeah, I mean, it was going really well for the first 8 months of the year.
Well, what pivoted? Because obviously you're not doing that now. Like,
Yeah,
where did this little change or major change start to happen?
yeah. So when I was I'm gonna step back a step further. Actually, when I was in that year, I took off in college where I didn't work. I did mostly traveling that year. It was like trying to decide what I wanted to do, and I had heard this history professor tell a story about how Michelangelo, when he sculpted the sculpture called the Moses, which was supposed to be the centerpiece of a tomb for one of the popes. And when he sculpted this, there was this big unveiling ceremony where the Pope was there. And you got to remember, during the Renaissance, the Pope is like president of the world, right? It's
Uh-huh.
like there's nobody with the kind of power that the Pope has. And so Michelangelo is in front of the Pope, and they're pulling like a sheet or whatever off of this sculpture. And he just is like down on his haunches, and he just doesn't say anything. right? He just stares at it. And it gets a little awkward. And, everyone's like, what? Michelangelo's supposed to say something, right? And finally, one of his students comes up and he's like, hey, master, you got to say something. And he takes his chisel and he throws it at the sculpture and he says one word, move, right? Because he was just so passionate about this sculpture that he thought it was just going to get up and move. Like, there are places in the marble where you can shine a light through the robe of Moses. That's how delicately carved it is. And most people who are, experts in this stuff say that it's probably the greatest marble sculpture ever made. Michelangelo being probably the greatest marble sculptor ever. And this is his best work. Better than the more famous ones like the Pieta or David or something like that. But it's really, really, really well done. It's got this long flowing beard and you can see individual hairs. And it's crazy, amazing. But I heard this story in my 21-year-old brain and thought, geez, I don't have anything in my life I'm that passionate about that I would go crazy in front of the president of the world.
Yeah, right.
So I need to figure this out. So that's why I decided to take this gap year. I'm going to go backpack around Europe. I called 1-800 Priceline, back before they had the internet, right? I'm calling the Priceline number. Probably looked it up in a phone book without my picture on it, one of those pre-picture phone books. And so we did this and it was just me back then. I went to Europe and I backpacked around. I flew to London and I thought, I'm going to make a pilgrimage to see the Moses, which is in this little church in Rome. And it kind of overlooks the Colosseum. It sits up on a hill. And it's a church called San Pedro in Vincole. It's just a really tiny little church. Most people never even go to it. Because there's so many churches in Rome.
Yeah.
So many beautiful Catholic churches. So many beautiful sculptures. Unless you're going to see the Moses, you're probably not going to. And maybe if you're a real deep Catholic, because they also have the chains of St. Peter there on display. And those are the chains that, St. Peter was supposedly wearing when the angels released him from prison, right? So I don't know if those are the right chains or not, but they have really old chains there and they have this sculpture of Moses. So I go into this church and I walk around and I find the sculpture of Moses and it's kind of in a dark corner and you can't really see it. It's actually kind of sad. And I realized that if you put a coin into this machine, it will turn the light on. It will shine a light on it. So I put the coin in the machine and I hear this as the lights power up, and I'm ready for this life-changing moment where everything's going to click into place. And I was kind of yeah, it's pretty nice, meh. I was it's cool. I'm glad I'm here. But it didn't solve what do I want to do. So I went outside and I sat down on the front steps.
You are such a good storyteller. Leading up to this entire thing, I'm getting chills left and right. And then you're like, it was all right. I'm like, I feel how you felt the moment.
Hey, listen, I went back since and I definitely recommend people go see it because it is it's an incredible sculpture. And I'm not the only person that thinks it's probably Michelangelo's best work. Michelangelo would be an authority on that. He thought it was. But Sigmund Freud wrote an anonymous essay about how great it was at one point called the Moses of Michelangelo. I think it's in German, but it's something like people from all over the world agree that this is an amazing sculpture. So I don't want to take anything away from Michelangelo's work there, but I had built it up in my head. I'd gone on my little Indiana Jones-like quest around Europe with a backpack and I'd gotten to Rome. And I'd never been outside of the continental U.S. before, except for maybe Canada, right? But I'd never been to Europe. And now I'm by myself, 21 years old, backpacking around Europe, spending time in Spain and France and England, and all these amazing places.
Culture,
yeah, just a complete mind-blowing experience. And I get to the Moses, which is the whole point of the trip, and I'm it's all right? So I walk outside, and I'm kind of what do I do now, right? I sit down on the front steps of the church. And I light up a cigarette because I used to smoke. I was young and dumb, right? So I light up a cigarette and I'm having a cigarette and I'm thinking about the Colosseum, which is right in front of me. I'm thinking, I really like the parts of this trip that I liked the most was seeing old stuff. So I made myself a little mental bucket list. Petra in Jordan, which is a really cool place. For people who don't know what that is, it's in The Last Crusade, the Indiana Jones movie, when they go through this narrow passageway and then there's the place where the Holy Grail is supposed to be. Well, the Holy Grail's not there as far as I know, but that place is real. It's called Petra and it's in Jordan. It's an amazing stone fortified city carved into the side of mountains. And it's
That's
really,
incredible.
really beautiful. So I put that on the list, and I put the pyramids in Egypt, on the list, and I put Machu Picchu in Peru on the list. And that was about it, because that's all I could think of. I mean, I don't know. I didn't have a smartphone. I couldn't make a list at that point. I was just sitting on the steps, pre-smartphone world, going, where should I go next? And that's when I decided I wanted to go to law school. Actually, I said, I want to make money, and I want to use that money to travel the world. So I went to law school for the entirely wrong reason, which was I wanted to get rich, not because I wanted to be a lawyer. No, it's not to say I was a bad lawyer, but I wasn't great because I never loved it. Right. So I tell this is all to tell you why I stopped practicing law. So I tell this whole lead up for this reason. I want you to understand that what happened next, flashing back forward to 2008, when I was practicing law after the 8 months of making more money than I really ever had any right to make. But it was super easy because the economy was crashing. And I was feeling bad about this because the economy's crashing and we're just having money just rolling in. I'm like, oh, I think I'll buy a new TV. Oh, I'm going to buy a new car. I mean, it was stupid. And I decided I'm going to go to Machu Picchu in August of 2008. Because that was the last thing on my little mental bucket list from Rome. I'd gone in 2000 in Egypt and spent 6 weeks living in Cairo and saw everything that I wanted to see in Cairo and the surrounding areas all through the country of Egypt. I've actually gone back several times since. Egypt's amazing. But I did that. And then I went to Petra and saw the ancient rock city there. And so the only thing left of those three was to go to Machu Picchu. So I was just 30 years old and I thought, I'm going to go see Machu Picchu. I'm going to take 2 weeks off. I left. I went with my now ex-wife and we went to Machu Picchu. We celebrated our anniversary in Peru. And I literally climbed up there in August of 2008, looking down at the sinking city. And I had a revisiting of that moment in Rome where I was like, wait, now what do I do?
Yeah.
Okay, I went and did exactly what I said I was going to do in Rome. I'm going to go make a bunch of money and I'm going to go see, old stuff. And now I've done that. I don't have any more old stuff on my list and I made a bunch of money. So what do? And I wasn't sure. I had a little mini existential crisis looking down at one of the most beautiful sights I've ever seen to this day, still one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. It's an ancient city on a mountaintop in the clouds. It's amazing, right? So we went to the rainforest and I did a little eco lodge thing. And then I went back from the rainforest and I checked my voicemail. I had to call on a payphone to check my voicemail back then, right?
I remember.
And I had a message from the other attorney that I had hired. And he said, I'm sorry to tell you this while you're on vacation, but I've decided to start my own law firm. And I thought, well, I'll deal with this when I get back. But he was giving me a 2-week notice. And it was already 3 days into his 2-week notice when I got it, right?
No, that's intense.
Yeah. And I came back and I was sick. And I went to the med center. They gave me some antibiotics, thought I picked something up in the rainforest. Didn't go away. So I went back to the med center on a Saturday night or Saturday during the day. And they were like, well, we'll just keep taking the antibiotics. We'll do a blood draw. We'll see if we can figure out if there's something weird going on. We'll follow back up. And I said, okay. And I went home. And then that night at about 10 p.m., I got a phone call from the doctor's office on my ex-wife's cell phone. Actually, my phone was dead. And it was like, hey, this is Dr. So-and-so. Can we talk to Jeff? So she gives me the phone and I talk to the doctor and the doctor says, there's really no easy way to tell you this, but you have leukemia and you have to go to the hospital immediately. Yeah. So I said, okay. And he said, do you understand what I'm saying? And I said, yeah, you said I have to go to the hospital immediately. I didn't want to say I have leukemia out loud.
Right.
Right. I was sitting in this moment for a second thinking wait, how do I say? And then of course he said, what hospital are you going to go to? We went through this whole rigmarole. I told them, they said they'd call in advance and they'd be expecting me and everything. And then I hung up the phone. We were watching Heroes. Do you remember the show Heroes?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're watching Heroes. There's 5 minutes left in the show when this happened. And my ex says to me, well, what did they say? I said, let's just watch the rest of the show. And she was like, no, what did they say? And I'm like, okay. So I said, these words, I have leukemia for the first time ever out loud. And then she started freaking out and crying. And I mean, like you do when you get news like that. I think I was in a bit of shock. I hadn't fully processed, but I understood what was going on. And I thought, well, at least I'm not watching the last 5 minutes of Heroes a second. Like I'm gonna, I'm gonna focus on getting to the hospital. And I could see immediately she wasn't in any condition to drive, and I didn't know how long I was gonna have to be there, and I didn't want to like figure out parking and stuff. So I called my ex-father-in-law and I said, "Hey, Dad, come on over. Like, there's some stuff we got to deal with, but can you come over right now?" And he showed up, and I told him, and then he freaked out, and we had the same problem again. The whole thing.
Yeah.
Eventually, people got together enough that he could drive us to the
Yeah.
and and I mean, I spent the next couple of weeks in the hospital. During that time, the other attorney followed through on his plan to quit. And I went from 2 attorneys making a whole bunch of money to 0 attorneys and losing about $5,000 a week. Literally in a 2-week period, I went from literally the top of the world, piles of money, have accomplished everything I set out to do, to in a hospital bed, assuming that I have weeks to live.
Oh my
And
gosh.
pending bankruptcy
Right.
myself, because I have tons of money going out the door all of a sudden and no income at all coming in. And then I had to hire people to cover the cases we'd already been paid for, which were a lot of them, but there was
Mhm.
no new money coming in. So we're more money going out the door. And I woke up a year later without really any money, a whole bunch of debt, and, still having leukemia. And it ended up pushing me into personal bankruptcy. And so, I went from literally like top of the world to like bottom of the world almost in a very short period of time. And I thought, I don't really want to be a bankruptcy attorney anyway. Like, this is the lesson I learned. It's like, no, I'm bankrupt. I'm in front of the people. Yeah, I'm in front of the people I worked with. And I was like, you know what? I just don't, I don't want to do this anymore. So
Yeah.
I took a corporate job. I moved to Tennessee, and started investing in real estate. And 6 years later, when the company I was working for was getting sold to a publicly traded company, I was like, I'm not working anymore. So I went bankrupt to retired in 6 years
Yeah.
by buying a bunch of single family houses and flipping a bunch of houses on the side while I was working a regular job.
Well, how'd you learn how to do that? Because, like, for me, I learned from a seminar and from a guy and a mentor and a thing. Did you just read a book, or how did that come about?
Well, I was always interested in real estate. I actually always said, real estate is something I'm going to do someday. Like, my whole plan was I'm going to make a bunch of money. And then once I've seen the world and made a bunch of money, I'm going to start investing in real estate. Just learned that, someday isn't necessarily a certainty for us. So the big lesson from getting diagnosed and thinking I was going to die, fortunately, I didn't die, but there was a period of time there where it didn't look great. After I went through that, I got really motivated to just do it. So I had read books and watched infomercials about no money down since I was 12.
Yeah.
Like, so I knew what I wanted to do, and then it was just about doing it. And I partnered with a friend of mine from law school who was flipping houses at the time, and we did a couple of deals together. And I didn't have any credit and I didn't have any money. Just gone through bankruptcy. My credit was terrible. I still had 100,000 student loans that didn't go away in bankruptcy. So I had this negative net worth. So I just had to get creative. And I just was like, I'm not taking no for an answer.
Yeah.
And I really think that's the thing. Like, when your back's against the wall, you have a choice. You can either give up, curl up in the corner and die, or you can fight your way through it. And I just chose to
Oh,
fight
yeah.
my way through it.
Oh, man. What made the transition from like doing the single families into multifamily?
Yeah, when I quit work, I got a little severance, like $40,000 or something, 50,000. I was around there somewhere. And I thought, well, I was doing all stuff in Michigan at the time. Like, we had 50 some single families, and a lot of them free and clear. And most of them I owned half or a third of with these other partners. And they didn't cash flow that well because we purposely just reinvested the money. So I was like, well, I have 40 or $50,000. I have a little bit of savings besides that. So I can go 6 months without working. If 6 months from now I still have $50,000 in the bank, then I can go another 6 months. I'm just going to take this break off. And I had to figure out what to do. So I thought I would do some bursts, buy and renovate, rehab, and refinance. So I did one of those, and I thought, this is too slow. And I was talking to a banker actually at closing from this duplex I was burning, and he was like, "Well, you should look at buying, B class and C class multifamily." And I was like, I don't know anything about that, but I don't have a job and I got time to learn. So I just started reading books about it, listening to podcasts about it. And that was in maybe like May of 2017. And in October of 2017, I bought my first 12 unit. November, I bought a 19 unit. And then the next May, we bought a 32 unit with a 1031. So we went from no apartments and about 50 units to, um, having 100 units of apartments in a very short period of time. And I was like, whoa, this stuff scales really well.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
first 12 unit I bought, I paid $635,000 for it. We refinanced it, got a $750,000 loan a year after we bought it. So we got all our money back plus some. Then we sold it for 1.2 million or 1.25 in 2019. So we had it for 2.5 years and turned $130,000 down payment into $500,000 1031, which I used to buy a retail shopping center that we still own
My
now.
gosh,
So they
yeah. And this,
literally
like,
turned like $100,000 into like a million in equity in 2 years. That's the power of the commercial stuff.
commercial. I love it. I try to explain to people it's almost the same, maybe a couple more pieces of paperwork, maybe a couple more months of closing, but you don't have to, with no money down strategies, bring money to the table because the building finances itself
Yeah,
versus your own personal credit financing the house, the single family, the duplex, triplex, fourplex,
exactly.
which is like hard for people to understand, but it's just
Well, if
so
you
worth
want to
it.
scale, you have to go bigger. It's really hard to scale in single. I mean, you can. I mean, look at like BlackRock bought 100 million, 2.5 million houses in the last year or something stupid crazy like that. But but it's difficult unless you have a ton of capital to scale in single families, and even then, it's difficult. But buying a 20 unit building or a 50 unit building, not all that much harder than buying a duplex in
Right.
reality. Like the paperwork's a little bit more, there's a little bit of experience curve that you have to get across. They're a little bit harder to finance if you haven't done them before, but like you said, it's not your personal credit, it's your experience and the project that pays the
Yeah.
debt. And so you may have to bring some capital in, but you can almost always bring someone else's capital in for the down payment. It's not like the sources and uses of capital rules for residential single families, where they're like, where did this money come from? And if someone loaned it to you, they've got to do
Yeah.
12 extra things of paperwork, and like they don't really care. Like the bank's like, oh, you're bringing in $500,000 and you're borrowing $1.5 million. Great, perfect, we're happy. As long as it appraises and the project covers itself, we're good, as long as the equity's there.
Yeah. Now, through all of this, what are some of the nuggets or like little pieces of advice that you've clung to keep you pressing forward?
Well, so the part of the story I didn't tell you is that when I was 17, I made a decision to give up bad days. I just
Mm,
completely gave up bad days. I'm 46 now, so I'm nearly 30 years since my last bad day. And people will say, "Well, wait a minute, you thought you were dying and you had leukemia or you went bankrupt. Like, surely those were bad days." And I mean, those were harder days than others. I mean, there's going to be good and bad stuff that happens to everyone, no matter what their situation. Probably every single day, there's good and bad stuff. But I kind of clung to this like idea that like we get to choose how we perceive the things that are happening to us. We can choose to believe that whatever that garbage is, that it's ruining our day, or we can choose to believe there's something to learn from it. And so I tried to grow through the pain instead of go through the pain, and like,
yeah.
so try to figure out how to do that. And I try to do that with under the guise of saying like, this is gonna pass, and like I'm gonna learn something from it. And then always remembering that somewhere in the world, like right now, someone's having the best day of their life. And somewhere else in the world, someone's having the worst day. So like today, it's neither objectively good or bad. It's just how that individual perceives it that
Yeah.
controls how that day is for them. And so I went, well, like knowing that it's how I think about the day that determines whether it's good or bad. If I
Yeah.
choose to think about it in a way that's good, it'll be a good day. And I think I can do that most days. And I started out saying, I'm going to do today's a good day, today's a good day, today's a good day over and over again. And I did that for months. And one day I walked into a convenience store and the guy said, "Hey, how's it going today?" And I said, "I never have bad days." And then I went, holy bleep, I never have bad days. I realized all of a sudden I couldn't even remember the last time I had a bad day, and I haven't had one since.
I
Like,
love that perspective so much. I'm usually telling myself And everything happens for a reason, and anything the bad that happens, I find the good in it versus like you're saying, I don't even have bad days. It's amazing.
Well, yeah. So, like, I mean, if you look at, like, say the day I was diagnosed with leukemia, like, you could say that was a bad day. I mean, surely it changed the course of my life. My brother actually came into the hospital that night and he said, "Oh, I bet today's a bad day." Like, he was like, "Oh, I'm going to prove that you can't always have good days." And I was like, I didn't even find out till 10 o'clock at night.
I had a
Most of
pretty
the day
good
was
day.
pretty good. Like, got a lot of cool stuff that happened. And the next day was a little bit harder, honestly, because like now I'm in the hospital all day, and I remember like 2 in the afternoon, there was a shift change, and this nurse came in and she looked at me and she was like, "Oh my God, Jeff, I'm so sorry you're here." And I looked at her and I went, "Oh my God, Shelly, I'm so happy I'm here," because she was like a childhood babysitter of mine. And I hadn't
Yeah.
seen her in like a decade. And I was like, "Wow, I get to see Shelly. This is great." And that was enough to make that day feel like a good day to me. Even though, like, on one hand, like dying of leukemia seems more significant than seeing a childhood babysitter, it's still the value I assign to it that mattered, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And it wasn't my fault that I got leukemia, but it was my responsibility to address it because no one else was going to address it. And by keeping a positive attitude, I was able to address it. And quite honestly, I love my life now, like going back and forth to Puerto Rico, having gone now to 7 continents, whole bunch of countries, traveling for a couple of months every single year, being able to go to places and do things like when we met without even having to worry about it. Like the guy that put that together called me like a week beforehand. It was like, "Hey, you want to come to Tampa and hang out with us next week?" And I'm like, "Sure." Like I have this flexibility, right? I can just
Yeah.
do what I want to do when I want to do. And all of that comes because I was diagnosed with leukemia. Otherwise, I would be a reasonably successful but not super happy bankruptcy attorney in West Michigan.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
yes, that day was hard. And my attitude was, it's a good day anyway. And in retrospect, not only was it a good day, it's probably the single most important day of my life. It's the day that
Right.
put me on the trajectory to be the person I am now, who I
Yeah.
love.
Absolutely.
So I would argue that, sometimes the harder days are actually your best days. And if you keep that in mind when you're going through hard stuff, then it works out.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, you're sharing so much information, so many nuggets of wisdom. That's incredible. I think everybody has some lessons that they need to learn from this. And until you've convinced yourself, it took months, you said, like you were saying it over and over and over again. And everybody needs to heed that advice. That's incredible. Some people don't know, but you also have some other fun stuff you do, right? You're doing a podcast and
Yeah.
you do some masterminds that you mentioned. At any point, if you're thinking you're listening to this episode and you're like, I need to know Jeff, how do I get a hold of Jeff? Well, number one, you're going to go friend us on LinkedIn and
And
follow, connect. And your favorite connection way that you want people to reach out to you is which way?
I should have a better answer to this. I'm at Jeffrey Holst everywhere, and I
Yes.
manage all my own socials. So Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, X, Be Real. I don't care. Most
Well,
people
I
don't even
love it.
know
I
what
love
Be
it.
Real is. Like if Telegram, I mean, honestly, like I'm at Jeffrey Holst on any kind of social media that I know of. If I'm not on there, then it's because I don't know about it. So, but yeah, but I mean, if you really like, you want to maximize your chance of getting my attention, Last Life Ever is the name of our podcast. Last Life
Yeah.
Ever is about living the best version of your life. And we have a private Facebook group. It's free to join. It's called Last Life Ever Private Group. And I'm in there all the time. So if you post something in there, I'm going to see it for sure.
I love it. Amazing. I'm so grateful that you have your story and that you're giving back in so many different ways and that you are like really creating that impact. Like almost, I interviewed somebody who was like, man, when I throw a rock in, the ripple that it creates. We're going kind of through those themes right now of how the people that we have the ability to impact, we do it because we can.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for your time. I'm
Oh, thanks
so
for having
happy
me.
you got to come in and share your story. Everybody, don't forget, click on all the links below and connect so that way you can follow and listen to his amazing podcast with his lovely partner that I say partner in crime. And I look forward to seeing you guys next time. Come hang out with us or me, the podcast, listen in, follow on YouTube, and I will see you next time. Thank you again, Jeff. Have a wonderful day, everybody.